Welcome to Water Wizards, where we get inspired by the movers and shakers of the world, those catalyzing change just like water.
Ooh, I got fancy with the intro, y'all. Celebrate another step in the right direction, which is expansion. Okay, grab your water, everyone. You know the codes are going to be flowing. Welcome to the Water Wisdom Podcast. I am Monica Painter, retired RN, said no to the jibby jab. If you want to know more about my story, look in the description. Today, I'm so freaking excited. I have an absolutely amazing guest. His name is Sean Webb. He is an author. He just published, it's not his first book, maybe a second book. Is it your second? Third book, The Human Mind Owner's Manual. It's on Audible. I'm about halfway through it. It's totally kick-ass. Go check it out. And let me give him a proper introduction. So bear with me for a second as I human and look at my notes. So Sean Webb is an absolutely amazing human being who is helping the world to expand their consciousness and frickin' free themselves from the matrix. He is a truth teller. He is a frickin' freedom fighter. And he recently has been studied by the Monroe Institute. And when they were studying him in meditation, check this out, hang with me here. What they found in the study is that his pattern of attainment value of awakened mind is among the highest in their database. Okay, so what does that mean? That means we're dealing with someone who has really put the work in and has so much wisdom and knowledge to bring to us. We're going to go deep with him and talk a little bit about his personal awakening journey to inspire you. And then we're going to talk about his mission and talk about the power of the brain and really opening up and expanding our consciousness to experience this life in a different way, in a better way, in a more exciting way. Also want to tell you that recently he was on the Sean Ryan Show podcast number 68. Go check it out. It's magical. And Sean Ryan has like the number 4 podcast in the world. Okay, so after that intro, I feel like I need to add one of those like round of applause, like for real. Thank you so much for joining us, Sean. How are you today?
I'm great. It's awesome to be with you. I appreciate the invite. It's fun to talk about consciousness.
Thank you. Okay, so I would love to start out by learning a little bit about you. I want to know about Sean. Like, how did Sean get to where he is? Tell us a little bit about, like, I even want you to go back into like your childhood, go where you're led. This is intuitively led question.
Sure.
Like, what were you like as a child and how did you get to this like awakened state where you knew something different was going on in the world?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in poverty and out in this little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, along with the rodents and insects that lived there with us. And I grew up pretty much, a weird kid. I was Asperger's before they knew what that was. And was just socially awkward and never really had a whole lot of friends, and was bullied for 8 straight years, which was weird. And then, but I always just kind of, followed my own drummer, so to speak, and really didn't take on the thoughts and actions of the people around me. So my childhood was difficult and weird, and my mom and dad weren't the greatest people on the planet. So I wound up going out in the middle of the night and walking around from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. just trying to see what kind of trouble I could try to not get into, and never arrested. So that was nice. But I was out in my early teens in the middle of the night, just screwing around and whatnot. And then as a defense mechanism, I went to the United States Navy after graduation of high school, and came back and was granted a high security clearance and got into high tech. And then that got me into a high tech job coming out of the military, where I was in the supercomputing sector, and I excelled really well for some reason. I just, took to it, duck does to water. And from there, at an early age, in my early 20s, I started, accumulating hundreds of thousands of dollars in income. And so I bought my own house. I bought a speedboat. I bought, Jeep Grand Cherokee, fancy red motorcycle, all the cool stuff that the American dream is supposed to tell you to have. Because I came from, 17, being on food stamps and wondering how I would ever pay for college if I could, deciding to go into the military. And then 10 years later, I'm buying my own house on a double lot in an affluent neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia. And as I'm looking out over this lot and the side lot that I had, I'm thinking, okay, so I should put a gazebo over there and maybe wire it up for sound. And, in the meantime, I'm waiting for the stereo installers to come to my house. We're about to load up my house with electronics. And we're hours away from a huge party of all my friends coming over and hanging out and et cetera. So I have everything that the American dream says I should have to be happy. Happiness equals an equation: house plus spouse plus 2.5 kids plus whatever, all these trappings of material attainment, etc. And here I was already asking, like I had just been there. I just signed the papers on my new house the day before with no cosigner at 27, 10 years after being on food stamps. I was the fucking American dream, right? So here I am already asking, what next? And so something clicked in my head, which said, okay, you're not happy. You have all of these things that society says or America says you're supposed to have to attain happiness. And, you have money and all this other stuff. You can go anywhere at any time that you want to. Like if you want to go grab a Braves game on a whim, no problem. It's like, I got a pocket full of $100 bills. If I want to go to Vegas and go gamble a bunch of money away or try to win a bunch of poker games or whatever, I can do that, right? It's like, what am I missing? So at that point, I had to start looking within to say, okay, there's something within me that's not right if I'm looking for something outside myself to try to increase my happiness levels. So then I took a big step back and started to reassess what I'd missed. And I thought, well, okay, I thought I had a good relationship with God. I was not super religious, but I was pretty well grounded in spirituality at that point, of having a good relationship with whatever else was up. And so I decided maybe I'm missing something there. Let me look at the commonalities between all the world's religions and what it is that's defining and dividing the religions apart. And I found out that there's not a whole lot that are dividing and defining the religions apart, except for a bunch of people who take religion way too seriously in comparison to the message it's supposed to be delivering and the place that it's supposed to be bringing you to from a spiritual perspective. But then I started to learn about D.T. Suzuki, an introduction to Zen and what meditation was, etc. And I started the practice of meditating because I understood that even the religion I was in, which was Christianity, Jesus meditated out in the desert for 40 days, to try to clear his head. So it's like, okay, even though the Baptist ministers around Atlanta on every freaking corner are telling me, no, don't do that meditation thing. That'll lead you to the devil. It didn't really make sense to me, right? So I started meditating, and that's when I had a consciousness expansion experience shortly thereafter, certainly within a couple of months. It might have been a couple of weeks of just almost immediately. I got sucked into the infinite vortex of energy and infinite intelligence, infinite wisdom. Went off so long that I had forgotten that I was a human named Sean, right? So you have these expansion experiences where people are like, oh yeah, I had one of those expansion experiences. There are high water marks that you have that you assume is everything when you have that experience. So when you experience that high water mark, just understand that high water mark is for you alone. And so if you're immediately identifying with something that might have happened with me, don't, because they're all unique individual experiences, and don't try to quantify it. Just accept it for something, a piece of data that you now have that you can use to help discern your existence in this universe, right? My experience was seemingly a little more powerful compared to what other people may have experienced, but I think that was a characteristic of the fact that I was at a pretty good crossroads in my life at that point, in that I wasn't sure whether I was motivated to go do this bullshit rat race thing anymore. Like I was that disillusioned with, okay, I've taken 10 years of my life and I've attained all these things, and now I'm at the end of the road, not where I want to be. So it's like, okay, I've wasted a decade trying to figure out, what my happiness entails. And here I am, no happier than I was when I was poor, when I have all these things. Well, I think there was a psychological component where I was like, I don't know if this whole fucking thing is for me at all. And so I think the power level of what I was granted or what I was given, what I was experienced would, because understand there's no this side controlling the experience type of thing. When you go into that realm of, that vastness of infinite void, infinite intelligence, infinite wisdom, and you see the universe in all of its dimensionalities, and you understand everything that you see in front of you, like you put it together yourself. Like that's next level weird shit. Like leaving the human existence and realizing you're not human, but that you're a human being, you're a spiritual energy having a human being experience, right? And being able to understand and see that, our regular resolution here in our visual spectrum is super horribly fuzzy in comparison to the reality of existence that you can experience in a different place of consciousness, etc. Right? Going into that changed my entire existence because it changed my sense of self. Right? So I went off, zipped off into the middle of the universe, was with God, became God, ran the universe for a little while, which was freaking exquisite. It was amazing. It was like everything was so complex, but I understood it all. But everything was so perfect that there was nothing there to change or do, which was really cool. It was like the whole thing's perfectly balanced. The whole thing, like, I understand it all. I understand, why babies die of bone cancer and all this other stuff. I mean, it's a physiological process, connected with the growth of the individual who's in that baby at this moment, yada, yada, yada. It's like crazy, and the growth of the parents who have to deal with that whole situation from a spiritual perspective. It's like crazy knowledge and crazy wisdom came through that. And I was able to bring back some of it on the way back, which, I went off for seemingly millions of years. And to the point that I forgot that I was a human being named Sean. And then it was like, I got tap on the shoulder. It's like, oh, it's time to go back to do what? Right? Go back where? Go back. I'm cool right here. No, let's not screw this mojo up. And I was like, you got to go back and be human. And I was like, oh, fuck. So reincarnation is real. What do I go back and be a baby body? All right, I guess I can do this again if you really need me to or whatever. And it's like, no, you're going back to be you. And then that's when I started seeing my body again. And I was like, fuck. You can't just tell me this stuff and then send me back into this shit show. So I was starting to lose as my consciousness, consciousness expands out into the greater unified non-local consciousness of the universe itself, and you understand more and you see everything and you become everything. And then as you shrink back down and focus, you start to lose all of the peripheral intelligence that you'd had access to just previously. So I'm losing, like, how the secret of black holes and secret of dark matter working and the different forces that everything creates that come together to makes all of our multidimensionality possible, and the things that come together to create our 3D space-time, 4D space-time capable experiences, that type of thing, that are intermeshed with the multidimensionality, but beyond the multidimensionality as well, as in that you can step outside of our 3D space-time, just zip right across the universe, that kind of cool stuff. I'm losing all this stuff. I'm losing about almost all of infinity. And so I said, well, you can't let me just come back and, lose all this stuff and be this human being. You got to give me something. I got to be able to bring back something. And it was like, okay, well, what do you want? And I was like, well, it would be nice for us to be able to knock out this pain and suffering thing. And the response back was, well, you aren't the first. And so I got visions of Jesus and the Buddha and Muhammad and all these folks who are like, yeah, let's not get this pain and suffering thing. And so it was kind of a joke where it's like, oh yeah, okay, get in line, buddy. let's see how well that's worked for the last few millennia, right? That all these people have tried the same shit, and what are you going to do different? And I was like, I don't know. I'm going to try it. And so I basically gained the access to the information of how our pain and suffering works, how it's created within the human mind. And I came back and put it all in a model and put it all in definitions and whatnot. And it turned out that no one in the world had done that yet. So that was kind of interesting that I came back with information and science that science then later proved was accurate. 100% of the model that I put together was accurate. And I pulled it out of the freaking cloud. I pulled it out of the void, right? So that right there tells me when we're talking about the analysis of this whole experience thing, this consciousness expansion experience thing, it's like, okay, could I have had that? Could that have been a creation of my mind to help get me out of a doldrum, all that type of thing, of engaging in human activity on the planet? Well, when you go there and you have that type of experience, there's an argument that could be made, well, isn't that something that your brain just made up to make you feel better? And the reality is I came back with something new that the world had not yet put out or discovered, as far as our creation of pain and suffering, how our human mind works, the definitions of human emotion, how the whole system can be placed into a logical mathematical framework. And so at that point, to me, it was like, well, that's concrete evidence that this is something else, that this is an intelligence that is beyond our human existence, our human understanding. So then that caused me to go from a high-tech executive working for Fortune Global 100 companies into an author, writer, speaker, mind spelunker, etc., over a couple decades ago, to say, okay, so if I can find this, if the village idiot can find this and bring back something that is so life-changing that, you go read my Mind Hacking Happiness Volume 1 book reviews. Those reviews are the review that any self-help author would love to have in their Amazon book listing. It is, holy shit, this changed my life. This is a game changer. I've read everything else, and this is absolutely new. Like, all the cool things that you would love to have people say, they say, connected with what I brought back. Has absolutely nothing to do with me, has everything to do with the information and intelligence that I gained access to, and then was able to reassemble into a way that humans can understand it, which is why I think I was kind of picked for the mission to do that. Because there is a bigger mission where when I was given that stuff to say, here's how the human mind works, here's how to reduce fear, anger, worry, regret, etc., sadness, there was a kind of a task assigned to that little piece of information that humanity didn't have anymore. And that task was, you got to deliver this to the human race so that they can start to reduce their pain and suffering. And we can get past this emotion of fear because it's controlling the world. And there's going to be some changes coming up with that. And people need to be readied for, so that the changes aren't so jarring as they would be if the changes weren't coming, or if the other actions were to occur in the future of the earth. So basically, I'm here to say, okay, so I'm going to give you all this information in a way that you can use it, and just like in a way that the FedEx logo has this big negative space arrow between the capital letter E and the lower letter X. This is marketing 101. When you see that little white arrow for the first time, it's like in the FedEx logo, you can never unsee it. Right. So this same type of thing of teaching people how to use their minds and how their minds work is one of those things where once you see it, you can't unsee it. And the cool thing is that once you see it working, there's some magic cheap tricks of neuroscience that turn down your negative shit and you can't even sabotage it, which is really cool. So that's kind of where I'm at this point of, childhood through awakening, and in the mission of delivering this system of mind management to human beings so that they can take control of their minds. And I'm fortunate enough to have multiple endorsements from U.S. Navy SEALs, and I've had a bunch of neuroscientists try to poke holes in it because I was like, please find the holes. And they were like, nope, this is good stuff. And the psychologists were like, I had freaking Jim Cohn on my podcast. He's one of the greatest psychologists in the world. who's like, wow, it's really cool that you took this little piece of my work and did so much with it. And I was just like, it ain't me.
Wow. That
Yeah.
is absolutely amazing. Okay, so I have a couple of follow-up questions for you. The first one is going back to that, the actual experience itself. So were you like in a meditative state?
Yeah.
When
So
in
I
the
went into
like,
a
what was the,
meditative.
like, time like, what was the time frame? You know what I mean? Like, was it one episode of meditation that this
Yeah.
all happened?
Yeah. So I went into the meditation. I started the meditation with a thought. It was a Zen Mondo that said, Yeshan, I believe it was, asked, or a student asked the master Yeshuan, okay, so how do you sit and not think, or what do you do when you sit? And the master said, I sit and not think. Well, how does one not think? And the master said, by not thinking. So the idea I knew generally was, and this is a big circular thing that can't, you cannot, the trick here of Zen koans and Zen mondos is that you can't have your mind lead you to enlightenment. It is not an understanding thing. It's an experiential thing. So what is the sound of one hand clapping? Well, there is no answer that you can answer to that riddle unless you want to be silly and do one of those. But the idea there is to remind you that your mind cannot lead you to an enlightenment. It's not an intellectual or thought process thing. It is a get your mind out of the way and then see what happens in your mind beyond that moment of silence. And so I knew that the idea was turn off all thought in your mind. And I knew that Zen folks were pretty efficient in being able to lead people to enlightenment from a per capita standpoint. They probably have the most enlightened masters of any group. So I went in and used my 800-pound gorilla of my mind against the 800-pound gorilla of my mind. And I said, you're not going to think anything. And no thoughts, no images, no, what does that dog look like when I hear it barking down the streets? None of that stuff I can entertain at all. Thoughts come in, they are isolated and ignored until they go away. And there was at a point, probably 20 minutes into that meditation, where my mind literally silenced for the first time in my life. And moments later is when I started to feel a buildup. I was just like, I was just kind of enjoying the bliss of the emptiness and the complete silence and the quietude. And then just a few seconds later, I started feeling this buildup of energy kind of behind me and also in the base of my spine, this whole Kundalini thing. Turns out that's real. So um, there was a point where there was a buildup of energy and was interesting. It was just like, curiosity. It's like, ooh, what's that? And then a light, multispectral white light started to permeate my existence. A vibrational noise of frequency started to permeate my existence. It felt like every atom in my body was vibrating at a weird frequency, and it was starting to separate my spiritual existence from my physical existence. Meanwhile, the energy is blowing up through my spine and super high heat going up towards the top of my skull. And I'm starting to panic at this point because the exponential growth of the energy is so quick, and so it's like it's coming. It's like bigger than you've ever experienced of anything in your entire life. So I thought I was dying. I mean, I thought this was the holy shit. I just had a heart attack, and now I'm going to be separated from my body, and here we go. And I was like, well, fuck that. I just moved my mom down from up north, and I got to take care of her. And, I got other shit going on, and yada, yada, yada. It was a big resistance of me allowing whatever was going to happen to happen. And that's when I started getting very vehement feedback that said, let go. And I was like, let go. Fuck that. And so I didn't let go, and was still kind of screwing around with it, but really being overwhelmed by this light, this noise, this vibration, this energy level that was like seemingly deatomizing me. And I wasn't ready to let go. And then this voice came through, like it shook the fucking universe. Let go. And I was like, that's a little more convincing, but I'm still not letting go. I got other stuff to do here. I can control this heart. I'm not gonna, I can just restart it, no problem. And finally, at the last moment of me like hanging on by my fingernails for dear life of my spiritual existence being sucked out of my body and going off to who knows where, There's this voice right behind me, like somebody came up from behind me, gave me a big old hug, and whispered in my ear. It's like, let go. And at that moment, with the feeling of being with someone who I'd known for eternity, saying, "Hey, man, it's cool, let go." And I was like, okay, fine, I'm done. Let's go. And I thought I was dying. I thought I was literally giving into death, which is why, one of those things that, kind of piques your interest in the Bible about surrender and, these hymns that I surrender all, yada, yada, yada. You want to talk about surrendering all, everything. I mean, absolutely, like surrendering your body, surrendering your life, surrendering all of your life's ambitions, surrendering what you're going to have for lunch tomorrow, surrendering absolutely everything. That's what the all means, the capital ALL, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's talking about when you're surrendering to spiritual existence. So that's when I got sucked into, like reverse sucked through the vortex of energy that was even yet still building, and went off into a full life review. And I was able to see and feel the emotions of the people who were with me during every moment of my life. And
Wow.
it was really crazy about how everything was intermixed in that space of thought and emotion between the people who were interacting with me and what I would do. And, I learned so much about, the little snide comments that I'd made as a teenager that fucking just crushed my dad. And I didn't even know it.
Wow.
Like all the weird little instances of stuff, you got to learn from. And, so that was interesting. But then I went on from there to a place of going, like, I was certain after seeing all those things, I was like, well, I'm not going to heaven because I was a fucking jerk all over the place. And then I got the message, no, it's already been forgiven. And I thought, well, that's fucking crazy. I've been this much of an asshole and everything's been forgiven. And then I went through a tour of forgiveness, basically. And I saw all these other lives and I saw all these other people doing horrific things. And about all of them, the feeling was they were all separate from source. And their problem wasn't what they were doing at the moment. The problem was that they were separated from God. And so that's what caused them the blindness to react in an egoic fashion to do whatever it was that they were doing at the moment because they were separated. And the feeling was, look at these people, shame on them. It wasn't that. It was, look at these people and how much of a victim they are because they'd been separated from God, and look what they're doing as a result. And of course they're going to be forgiven for this, the actions that they're taking, because they're separated from God and they want to be one with God. They want to be connected with God, but they have lost themselves. They've lost their connection, and so they should be pitied, not vilified. So I went through that whole thing for I don't know, 1,000 years or so, seeing everybody's mistakes and seeing how they're all immediately forgiven. And then after that, I went through a number of kind of tours of, how the world kind of is put together from a consciousness perspective. And then all of a sudden, my question of, because the little prayer that I said right before I started the whole meditation thing is that I stopped and said, if you want me to know more, I'm ready. And it was more of a desperation of, look, this whole world thing, I've seen it, I figured it out. It's a bunch of bullshit. So if you're ready for me to gain more information and take this to the next level, I'm ready. So at that point, after seeing all this stuff and learning all this stuff and experiencing the infinite forgiveness, there was a question that was asked. It was, well, what do you want to know? And so, me and my stupid hubris, I said, everything. Right. And it's at this moment that I learned the age old saying, be careful what you wish for, because I was given literally everything, all infinite wisdom and intelligence in the universe all at once. And it about ripped the screen door of my consciousness off its hinges and destroyed it altogether.
Wow.
As everything was passing through me. And so I barely got a thought out, too much, turn it down. And boom, immediately turned down to a level that I could process in my consciousness, in my intellect. which was expanded well beyond what my normal intellect was. And understand, I'm no dummy on the planet, but the amount of intelligence and wisdom that was passing through me in those moments was flabbergasting, like way beyond any processing capability that this human physiology could have. And so from there, I got to understand the whole universe and how it worked and yada, yada, yada. And then got to go off and drive the universe for a little while, which is really freaking cool. It was just like, here, I got to go pee, take the wheel. It was crazy. And but then after a while of knowing everything, seeing the future of the planet, seeing how many non-human intelligences there that exist, etc., understanding jumping across the universe with the assistance of technology, all of that cool stuff was in my head. That's when I got tapped on the shoulder and said, "Oh, it's time to go back." It's like,
So
oh, shit.
how did your physical body handle that experience? Once you came back into your body, what was your body doing?
So my body was bawling, like full out sobbing. I was still laying in the spot on my bed where I had started meditating, but the pillow below me, below my head, was soaked completely fucking through. Like,
Wow.
everything that I could feel back here was wet. Everything that I could feel under the pillow was wet. I had to throw the thing in the dryer. And I was just bawling my eyes out when I got back. And I had been for quite some time, it seems. I almost felt dehydrated to a point. And I was super grateful for the experience, and super grateful for having every answer that I could have ever asked in the entirety of my human lifetime answered. Like, that's how much information that I was able to glean from this experience, and had no more questions that I needed answers to from a personal perspective, which was nice. And then I also had within me the stuff that I needed to unpack, because it came in a big package of information that it took me a few years to be able to, lay out into a model to say, okay, here's how you're an individual human being, but here's the thing that makes you an individual human being, and here's how that individual human being thing plays into all of your emotional landscape from the time of your birth to the time of your death, etc. Here's how you can take control of that thing and then change your entire, like, that whole thing took multiple years to put together from the glut of information that I was given all at once. So I came back and I was just, thank you, so grateful that I had been, I don't know what words you want to put to that experience, but I was certainly tapped, because the last thing that I got from that experience was tell them. And I was like, fuck.
That's amazing. I want to talk about something specific that you said in that experience. When you talked about the expansion of your consciousness and being able to look at those who were no longer connected to God, and to view them in a different way, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of compassion of, oh my gosh, they are disconnected from God. And actually just viewing that in a different way. Okay, I want to take that nugget and I want to ask you a question based on that awareness and of those who, well, I'm going to call them those powers that were. I'm not going to call them the powers that be, but the powers that were. Do you believe that the human experience has always been this limited? Because you made a point about the forgetting, the coming back and forgetting so much. And you were like, well, let me hold on to some of that. So this like cycle of reincarnation where we forget, we come back and we forget, we are so disconnected. Do you believe that it's always been like that? Or are there things that have put into place to create that limited, or to amplify the limited experience for us?
Yeah, I don't think that's always been the case for us. I mean, I'm at the Monroe Institute now as an ambassador for those guys, and they kind of have me on scholarship up there that I get to go and take any class that I want, but I get to meet a lot of the really cool folks who have saved the world a number of times that you guys don't even know about. When you're talking to those types of folks, they'll tell you, And I mean, Joe McMoneagle is a good example of one of those folks who has a nosebleed clearance and has been called in on all the holy shit, the world's about to end situations. And he's helped align things to where they don't, we don't have to have as many problems as we would have. He says this is our first sense. This isn't our sixth sense. He goes, this, expanded consciousness thing allowed some guy in the bush to say, don't go over there near that shrub because there's a cat in there. And the guy who didn't have that got over there and got eaten. Right. So this type of capability has been inherent within humanity for millions of years, potentially, certainly tens and hundreds of thousands of years. But there are, I think, without getting into too much trouble, there are individuals who are selfish assholes on this planet. Let's say that. And there are people who identify that if humanity is stupider than or more busy with chasing things that are connected with ego, then they will be less likely to ask who's really in charge and what's going on and why can't I be in charge, and whose kids are flying off world in the event of another cataclysm on the planet, and the secret spaceships that we have, and why aren't my kids on that list, that type of thing. There are certainly systems that can exacerbate the separation of mind from God, certainly, and that can keep us in a state of fear, certainly. So I certainly don't think that we're at a pinnacle of attainment, but at the same time, we're also it's a dichotomy, because we have not been we're not at a higher level of attainment yet as we have been in the past, to be able to do things with our minds and understand things and travel, maybe out of body, that type of thing, to go see places, etc., share information, speak with other races or other types of beings, etc. So we're not at a high point there. But ironically, because there are so many of us, if we raise the bar on consciousness just a little bit, the number of people who are raising their consciousness raise the level of consciousness quite substantially, which could certainly overtake anything that we've done previously, and then flood our physiologies with a capability that we've lost thousands of years ago. But at the same time, because so many people are pushing, that's a tipping point that allows the energy to come flow through freely and plug people back in when they've been unplugged their entire life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And so it starts on the individual level, right?
Yeah, it has to.
It has to start with the individual.
Yeah, it has to.
And
like even the Dalai Lama said, there will be no world peace without inner peace. Well, that's talking about the individual level of individuals increasing their ability to understand compassion over the egoic battles of resources and power and money and monetary systems and religious systems, et cetera, that are causing these wars, et cetera. You need to be able to get beyond that. Well, it happens at an individual level only, one person at a time, right? But then it builds up over time to increase consciousness to where the people who are resistant or maybe not, kind of missing the boat a little bit, the waves wash over them because the consciousness is raising all boats, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I would like to talk about that in terms of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about money because this it is clearly one of the ways in which we are deeply, deeply controlled by the matrix is through finance.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, I want to focus on those who are starting to expand their consciousness, because if they're not, they probably wouldn't be listening to this podcast. So what I've noticed in those that I engage with is when they start expanding consciousness and they're like, oh, I have a mission here, right? Like there's something different that I'm supposed to do besides sit in a fucking cubicle from 9 to 5 or work at a hospital for 13 hours a day and hand out narcotics and literally addict people when you thought you were going to save the world as a nurse, but really that's not what's happening. When you get clued into that and then you're like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Oh, I'm going to go over here and, be a healer or be a motivational speaker, something along those lines to really lift people up. But then this for me too, and I've worked through a lot of this, but for me, this voice came in that said, "Oh, you're gonna like charge for that?" Oh, that, and I've had people say this to me, how dare you charge for your gifts? And this is a big thing, and it's very subconscious for us light workers. And so this practical, I want to give people some very practical steps. And we know that observing is like step number one. Like, why am I thinking that thought? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? But can you give us some practical steps based on, the Human Mind Owner's Manual? You have to get the book. I'm about halfway through. It's amazing. To help us to find that like sweet spot, because then we also get this idea in our head that ego is bad and the ego must be crushed. I've got to be this light being, but listen, we're operating in a fucking 3D world.
Mhm.
We've got to have paper in
Right.
order to feed our kids and have the fun experiences. The more money I make, the more change I can make.
Yes.
Can you speak to us in some practical terms on how the fuck we can get a hold of our money story? Because we've also been told all our lives, money is the root of all evil. My dad, I was talking to him last week and he said it to me and I was like, I've undone that. God damn it. Why are you saying this to me right now? I didn't say it to him, but I was like, la, 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 la. Oh my God. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So you're right. 100%. So, all right. For the first thing that I would counsel people who, money is the root of all evil. The Mind Hacking Happiness Red Book actually has chapter 9, which explains the root of all evil, which goes a level below money, right? Money is not the root of all evil. The root of all man-made evil is the ego and the attachment, the process of attachment of the human mind to anything, to any one thing, including, we start with our body, right? Which is the first lie that we tell ourselves, that we are this, everything within the confines of this skin, including the thoughts and emotions and feelings, etc., associated with everything within the confines of this skin. And from there, it just tells lie after lie after lie after lie. I am Sean, I am male, I am, whatever religion, whatever politics, whatever that I'm attached to. That's what your mind creates as ego. And the defense of that attachment system is the basis for all evil, because it starts with, I am this body and you are that body, right? And we know that to be a lie from a spiritual perspective, that we're all one consciousness in different physiological forms, simply performing as a lens back onto the universe, looking at the universe from a different perspective. But we're all like Tatvamasi is the ancient Sanskrit teaching that is, I am that. So I look at you and you're just another version of me. And I hope that when you look at me, I'm just another version of you, and we're doing our own individual things. But in reality, from a spiritual perspective, when you're talking about the one unified field, well, there's no discernment between that and other in that one unified field. So from there we go to, I am one with everything. I am every person who I interact with. To, okay, so at any point that I put on ego to try to put a different shading on my lens of the decisions that I'm going to make and the attachments that I'm going to make and the things that I want to teach, even as a spiritual teacher, right? At the point that I'm putting on even one thing, I might as well put on the whole thing, right? Because now you're into the discernment of, okay, good attachments versus bad attachments and things like that. And there's a little bit of that that plays into it. Like, you don't want to be the asshole who walks into Kmart and says, fuck the corporation, I'm not going to pay for this shit, and walk out, and shoplift and all that stuff, and that stuff that could collapse societal and throw us into chaos, which would cause more harm than good, right? We don't want to do that kind of stuff. But at the same time, at the point you're putting on one thing, you're going to be putting on many things. You're going to be putting on many attachments of mind. So we do live in a 4D space-time society that's run on a trade economy. So to be able to feed your kids, if you're going to do good in the world, it's okay for you to say, I'm going to accept money for this and I'm going to demand money for this. Like, I like put out a lot of videos that are free on the internet, and I put out a lot of stuff that's free, and I give people my time for free often, like veterans and whatnot who call me up. I'm right there for them, no charge whatsoever. But at the same time, when I deliver a book, well, I got to pay the people who made the book machine. I got to pay the people who put together the paper for that book. I got to pay the money for the bandwidth that it's going to take for me to upload and deliver that book, etc. So yeah, tough. you don't like it, then you can go pick another teacher and have another delivery mechanism of the information that you want. It won't be Sean Webb stuff, but at the same time, if you want to pay Sean Webb for delivery of a book or delivery of an online course, or whatever it is that I'm selling, then that you got to know that money's going to go towards the greater good. Am I going to, I just got a Tesla Model Y, right? I got it from Hertz because it was on sale and it had the full self-driving mode. It was a really good deal, yada, yada. But I needed a new car. Well, sales of my book, I'll pay for that car. Yes, I'm going to certainly pay for things in my life that will make it easier for me to deliver my message. And those things will have a positive rub off on me that I'm driving around a really nice car. But at the same time, it's like, I'm going to use a lot of the money for greater good. I'm going to be using the money to build a better studio. I'm going to be using the money to bring more people onto a team who could be more effective in delivering the message, to reduce the pain and suffering in individuals, right? So you have to just get comfortable as a teacher. You just have to get comfortable that, the world runs on money. We're trying to battle the whole system, but it doesn't mean we have to completely be devoid of the system and ignore the system and not utilize the system to our better interests, because that's going to be the way that we're going to be most effective. Because if we try to go on the position that, for morals sake, we're not going to accept, monetary gain, or we're not going to demand prices for things, or we're going to, work on a not necessarily a altruistic basis, but at the same time, it's more like a gift economy type of substance. That only works for so long. It only works until you find a certain number of people who are going to be selfish and try to vampire you dry of your blood for their benefit without giving you anything in return, right? So there comes a point where you just got to say, hey, we live in this system, and I'm going to accept the money, and I'm going to demand the money. You can't get me for less than $750 an hour now, and that's about to go up, frankly, to tell you the truth. So I only give time away for the folks who are going to help spread the message or be friends. I give time away to friends all the time, or people who are beyond means to be able to pay, right? I do that all the time. But for the folks who, like the billionaire who I just counseled for the last few months, he fucking paid through the nose, right, to get one-on-one time with me. So, and he got what he needed. He got his life back on track. He got his investments going again. We got him squared away in like 7 weeks. It was awesome. You got to be comfortable with having something to offer, and then also accepting or even demanding money for, in exchange, the benefits of your curation of the information, right? Because let's say you've spent more time with this, you're not any more of a divine person than that person is you're teaching, certainly. But at the same time, you got to be comfortable with the fact that you've taken the time to curate the information and maybe discern a little bit more wisdom than this person has, who's been focused on their job, their business, or kids, or whatever, and wants to come spend a weekend with you, or come spend a couple of hours with you, or spend time with your book, or whatever it is. You got to be able to willingly accept the money that they're trading in return for your curation of the things that your guys are equal on from a spiritual perspective, but maybe they want to understand it a little bit better from a mental perspective. And on the other side of the fence, the people who are looking for that curation and looking for that organization and that insight from you, who has spent more time in the trenches with this spiritual stuff than they have, they should be willing to pay you for that service, period. And if they aren't, and if they want to stand on, this is given to you by God, you should give it to me for free. Fuck that. Sorry. You want to go to Burning Man if you want to be, if you want to find a bunch of people who are walking around with supposed wisdom that's worth you listening to, and good luck finding one who's worth listening to, right? So, that's your druthers. Knock it out. Awesome. Go be that. But you're not going to interface with me if you have the money, you want the curation, you want my time, you want my wisdom, you want my teachings, and explanation of my experience and how you can get there. Unique to me, right? I'm trying to teach how everybody can do this, and you don't want to give up some value for that. Okay, go find another teacher. That's my position.
Okay, and that's how ego serves you, right? That's a function of your ego, right? To have that confidence and actually ground that in. Okay, so from a consciousness and like neuroscience perspective, getting comfortable with that. And really money on all levels. Like for the person who is working their way into abundance, who is starting to open up to more, like what's the process? In your book, you talk about like the 3 steps to shifting your consciousness, right? And I know step 1 is like that observer space. Can you give us like a simplified version of what we can do in the moment when we start having the resistance? Like, how can we shift that? And then a process that we can lean into with intentionality and consistency to actually change our life.
Yeah, well, the one great tool that I love to tell people about all the time is a very simple tool where you can shock your mind out of your being trapped into your ego. And which is, if you start to fall into the, that question of, am I worthy of higher money? Like that's a big one that people get stuck on. Of, you know, am I worth asking for money or getting more money for the time that I'm putting into something or the effort that I'm putting into something? And you start to have that underlying subconscious saboteur who gets in there to say, you really don't deserve this amount of money, or whatever it is. You can use the tool that I put together called the me or the I, which is a great little tool where anytime that you take a troubling response within you and you try to create a sentence about that, like, well, I'm not really sure I deserve that money. You put the word the in front of the word I or in front of the word me anytime you want to use it. So you say, the I isn't sure whether I should charge this money or whether I'm worth this money. Right. So then you start to put a separation between you and the egoic identity who is then trying to sabotage you a little bit. Right. Because that's a process of your inner value. When you're starting to question or whether or not you're deserving of a higher income or whatever it is, that's a thought coming from your subconscious that is not self-serving, and you need to identify it and subjectify it. Right, you need to divide it off from your observing wholeness, spiritual existence, to say the me says this, or the me feels angry, or the me feels uncertain about charging this kind of money for people. The I is questioning whether I deserve this type of income. Right, at the point that you're putting the in front of the word me or the in front of the word I, and this works for anything, like, she broke up with me, she broke up with the me. Uh, you know, the, I was really angry about what this person said or this headline. The I was really angry about this headline or what this person said, right? So at the point that you're putting the word the, you're making it a subjective existence, and you identifying you as the observer versus the process of your mind that's creating that turmoil for you, which is going to allow you to sidestep and get around that turmoil quite quickly, because you can identify that it's a process of your mind that is starting to limit you, and you can kind of coordinate or put it into quarantine and put it off to the side to say, I'm not going to deal with that at this moment. I'm going to take the actions that are conducive of me making money by grabbing this credit card of this person in front of me who's about to swipe through my iPad or whatever it is for my service that I'm about to give them, or the hour that I'm about to charge them for, etc. That's the kind of thought process you need to put yourself through to say, the things that are going to be resistant to me getting a higher income or a higher money, or to a job that I've been in for a while and I haven't gotten a raise for a while, and they need to, bump it up because inflation, yada, yada, whatever it is, and you're uncertain about going and taking that action, you need to analyze that reaction in your mind and put it aside to say, okay, that's not really me. That's the processing of my brain that is trying to, reduce the amount of risk of, me going and asking for a raise and all of a sudden they say you're fired. That's the fear response, or the questioning of whether or not you have the value of asking for X amount of dollars per hour, or X amount of dollars for your course, or X amount of dollars for whatever it is that you're starting to trade another person with. Well, all of a sudden you put a smaller price tag on it because you're afraid that someone will say no, and that's going to be a reflection back on your ego, right? You need to be able to identify those processes within your mind, set them off to the side, and then go do what you need to do to attain the goals that you've had or that you want to have, right? Does that make sense? I don't know whether I
So,
answered your question.
no, that does make sense. And so really just asking the question is that powerful. Asking the question in that way is that powerful and actually changes the way that your brain's firing, right?
It does, and that was a science that was identified by Matt Lieberman at UCLA in 2007, and it came out to be a bunch of studies called the Name It, Tame It studies that were on copycat. Because basically, what you're doing is you're taking a mental process, a cognitive process, and putting it to your emotional process. And now, the basis for this circuit in your brain is a survival mechanism, is because you're walking by and you see a coil on the ground next to you. Out of the corner of your eye, your eye's going to see the coil, and immediately it's going to jump to the fact, oh my God, that's a snake, right? So your limbic system's identifying threats. It says snake. It starts, pushing you back and stutter steps away from the snake, whatever. It's dumping adrenaline into your system to get you ready for fight or flight. It's shutting down your prefrontal cortex so that you don't have to think, and your blood is being shunted to the threat areas of your brain to prolong your survival, right? So then you look down and you see it's a hose. So this rewrites everything because now that's not a threat anymore. And the problem that you now are facing is that your body is in the process of dumping a bunch of energy into your system, which is going to be burned for your survival. But now there's no threat. So now you're wasting resources that you could use 100 yards down the road when a real threat occurs. So your brain needs a way to immediately turn off your troubling emotion in a split second. And when you look down and see it's a hose, your fear goes away. You're still going to have to metabolize the adrenaline. You're still going to have norepinephrine to deal with. You're still going to have a number of things that are going on within your physiology, that your heart rate's going to take a little while to come back to normal after you've freaked out that you might have stepped on a snake. But at the same time, your brain immediately turns off the fear. There's no more fear that's kind of diving in to say, hey, dump more adrenaline, dump more norepinephrine. So that this process stops, and it is a life-sustaining survival technique that your brain has the ability to turn off your negativity. Well, Jim, it was in UCLA with Matt Lieberman, who then ran a number of people through an fMRI to see where this process started. He sent two people through, a control group, two groups through. One was, we're just going to show you these images, and we're going to show you that they have emotional content, and we're going to watch your brain. Now, what happens when you show images or sounds of emotional content? The mirror neurons within your brain pick that up and start to show anger or sadness or whatever that you're seeing as a kind of an empathy, a natural empathy circuit. And so what they saw in the control group was that when anger was in the image, the anger system within the brain started firing within the individual. Well, then what they did is they threw a second group through and said, okay, what we want you to do now is simply just name the emotion: anger, sadness, fear, whatever it is. And we want to watch your brain. And so the second group they sent through, and they watched the mirror neurons start to fire up the center. And then they had the person name the emotion in play, which is putting a cognitive process to an emotional process. And immediately, even before having to analyze the data on live on the fMRI screen, they saw the amygdala start to shut down. They saw the limbic system start to shut down the negative reactivity based on the cognitive understanding of what the emotion was. So this process of understanding your equation of emotion variables, which I explain in the book, your expectation and or preference as compared to your perception. Once you start to look at those things and understand what has caused your anger, sadness, fear, worry, regret, etc., you start to look at those things in their individual components of the variables that have caused your emotion. That kicks your name it, tame it circuit into overdrive and immediately shuts off your troubling emotion that quickly. So it's kind of a hack, which is why I call it mind hacking happiness. It's a hack of the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex and the medial prefrontal cortex, shutting down the limbic system in real time. And that can work for not just a snake that you learn as a hose. It can learn, like, I process the emotions of me walking into the assisted living facility where my mom lived, to have her open the door, look up at me, and see me as a stranger saying, "Can I help you?" Right? So in that moment, her dementia had caught up with her to the point that she no longer remembered her only son, because she had all girls and wanted a son. And I came 12 years later as an accident. And so now the person who could remember being my mom, the only person on the planet, no longer has those memories. So I just lost my mom. My mom lost her only son. I lost all future hugs, all future conversations with not with the physiological human being standing in front of me who bore my biological existence, but the person who can have the memories of all that stuff now gone. So I processed that in about 3 seconds and didn't have to go back to it. Didn't have to go out in the car and bawl and cry and yada, yada, yada. I processed through that whole thing in about 3 seconds by hacking the same circuits, by simply making a decision. Okay, so we're at this point. My tons of equations of emotion that are being processed within me at this point are nothing but negative. So I can just shunt those off and pass them and not allow them to process. And then that'll immediately allow me to become the person who's the nice guy just stopping by to make sure that everything's okay for her. And now I'm immediately in service to her rather than in service to me.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's how deeply and profound this practice can be. But at the same time, you can use it from not ruining a business relationship by not being pissed off about how this email was worded when it was probably misworded anyway, or this headline or whatever that's going to ruin your day, which you could certainly sidestep if you wanted to consciously. These tools can allow you to do that, but then it can also allow you to deal with the super tough, complex systems that emotional reactions that you experience throughout your life. So, yeah, you can certainly take a quick hack of looking at your expectation and or preference and or your perception, because that'll dump you into a meta awareness that'll allow you to step away and say, okay, whatever I'm dealing with at the moment is a process of my mind, which is an optional input that I don't have to necessarily react to. So you've got that, and you've got the adding the word the to the word me or the word I, which then also separates you from the process of your mind, and reminds you that you are the spiritual existence within you having a human experience. Part
Yeah.
of that human experience is the process of the mind giving you the emotions and thoughts that you're having to deal with. Now you can remind yourself, okay, so I am the spiritual entity that's just one step beyond that. So let me take all this information and make a sound decision of where I want to take my life at this moment. Right? Those things are two good tools that you can use to take
Awesome.
control of your life.
And then it's like a muscle, right? It's like the more you use it, the more quickly the process can happen for you, and you can literally change your entire life. Change
Yeah,
your entire life.
it totally. In fact, the science on neuroplasticity has already been done to where, they studied this group of cab drivers who were about to take the knowledge in London, and the knowledge is you to be able to give a cab driver a license, you have to know over 100,000 points of interest with 2,500 routes between points A and B. You have to know the direction of traffic on a one-way street in the morning versus going the other way in the afternoon. You have to be able to uh, navigate around traffic snarls, et cetera, in London, because they have millions of people and they don't want cars on the road. Just, anybody, oh, I'm going to be a cab driver. You got to get a license to be a cab driver. And you got to memorize all this shit because they don't want you using GPS, because what if technology goes down, then all of a sudden the traffic's in a snarl all over London because everybody's following their technology. No, you got to know this stuff by heart. And so they studied the two groups, one who was not studying for the test and the other group who was studying for the test, which, by the way, takes 4 years and 7 attempts to pass on the average person being able to get a cab driver's license. Well, this person's brain grew in the hippocampus to where their memory circuits, their gray and white matter, increased over time based on their studying for this freaking test of, they have to know London by heart. Well, your brain does that on your emotional side as well. Like when you start to use your brain to increase your emotional intelligence and decrease your reactivity, you do that more and more over time. Your brains will change in form and function to help you do it and create a Jedi existence for you when you're not even thinking about it, which is really cool.
It is. And it's just, life is so much better when you don't get pissed off about everything.
I know,
I mean,
right?
I used to, believe it or not, I used to be an angry little woman. Oh, I was such an angry little woman for years. I was a real nice kid, and I would turn on the nice when I would go out, but man, I was just in so much. I had created so much chaos for myself at home within my marriage, which I take full responsibility for. We created chaos together. And I just was overreactive to everything. I would snap at the kids and it wasn't them. It was all me. Like, it wasn't a big deal. So what? They spilled their fucking Cheerios. Big deal. It's not that big of a deal. And I would make such a big deal out of it. And then finally one day I was like, something's got to change here because I am a bitch. And I kept saying, I don't want to be a bitch anymore, but I wouldn't change anything. And I know there are people out there watching that can identify with this. You have a behavior and you say, I do not want to act like that. But then you keep doing it until you don't do it anymore, until you decide to reclaim your power and actually focus on yourself and make the change within. And you just have to be done with that shit. And I did. I hit that point, and that was about 7 years ago or so. And my life is so much smoother. When shit hits the fan and the field tries to hook me, I'm just like, okay, not a big deal. I'm going to breathe through this because I'm going to create the outcome based on my emotional response. And so I'm just going to relax into it. And then sure enough, everything smooths out. Just
That's
breathe.
exactly right.
Breathe and soften. The more you breathe and soften, the more you soften your body, rewire your brain, and it completely changes everything for you. So I really appreciate your in-depth explanation of that, because there's a lot of people who feel like they need to know, like, why would that be so simple? Well, there you go. There's the brain science behind it. And there's so much more going on a subconscious, deep neuroscientific level that you don't really have to know. Just do the fucking thing.
Right, exactly.
Do it over and over and over again and allow the simple thing to work.
Exactly. No, and you're right. I mean, and I think that's why people have loved this Human Mind Owner's Manual is kind of a part 3 of the series that I put out. It was the Mind Hacking Happiness Volume 1 and Volume 2, then takes a left turn into the science of enlightenment and goes deep on that stuff. And then this third book talks about your non-local consciousness and how you're connected into the universe, and how science is actually starting to show that connection in a way that the skeptics can't even refute. But yeah, it's really simple. I mean, when you understand the processes that your mind uses to create your inner bullshit, is what I called it, you can break the process, right? You can start grabbing control knobs and pulling on levers and doing things intentionally that will have an everlasting positive effect on your life. And it's super simple stuff, to where if you want to understand the neuroscience and the brain regions down to the nth degree and exactly what's going on inside the pyramidal neurons and all that other stuff, you certainly can. And I provide the path for you to get there. But at the same time, if you want to just get the cheap tricks of neuroscience out of the book to be able to turn off your negativity at will, that's there too. It's like, all you have to do is one little thing, and then all of a sudden your day is a heck of a lot better. And oh, by the way, so are the days of the people who are around you, which is, you haven't gotten to this chapter yet in the book, but 2 of those chapters are written by Navy SEALs. And one of the Navy SEALs, Doug, says, before our trip down into the Amazon to drink copious amounts of ayahuasca, he was kind of an asshole, right? I mean, go figure. One of the world's most effective killers has an aggression problem. Okay, so so he writes about that same transition too, to be able to take control of your mind, and all of a sudden he's an amazing dude from an individual's perspective, but at the same time he wasn't ready for a deep relationship with a female, or to raise a family. And now he's got both. Like, he's got a kid on the way, and he's got a wonderful wife, and he's much more empathetic and compassionate of a human being than he was before, based on his ability to take control of his mind. And that's it. That's all he did, is he simply changed something within his own purview to be able to take control of how his mind processes things. And now his life is 180 degrees different to where it was, to where, he had problems with TBI and PTSD, and those things are gone. He had issues with anger, and now that's gone. And now he's an awesome human being all around, and can kill you with his little pinky finger.
That's a well-rounded individual.
Not that that's a thing anymore, but you know what I'm saying.
That is amazing.
It's a fun
amazing.
Little add-on.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I want to honor your time. And before we wrap up, I would like to show you what I did with the water. I mentioned a little earlier. So with all of my guests, I take a little Petri dish of water, put a little bit of Kangen water in it, and I sit holding the water and just setting the intention to, in some way, that the water will experience my conscious experience with your work and what is going to come through.
That's awesome.
So It's so cool. And I'm really curious of what you see and then how you interpret this experience. Okay, share screen. I can't read. Here we go.
Oh,
Can you
wow.
see that?
I can see
Okay. Okay. So it's always different. Every time it's different for every guest, which is very cool.
that's cool.
And isn't that neat?
Wow. I see. I don't know what. That's really neat.
Isn't that neat?
It almost looks like
Um,
a person in there.
it's very abstract. What did you say? There's what?
It almost looks like a person in there.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I kind of see the side. Are you seeing a side view of a
Yeah,
face?
yeah,
I'm seeing a side view of a face and an eye where that little epicenter is. It's actually raised. And this is interesting. I want to try and get back to if you are listening to this, go to my YouTube page and about the marker of an hour and 10 minutes, you can see the visual. I'm going to click through these other ones. I zoomed in a little bit there. I mean, there's some serious structure going on here.
that's cool.
It looks almost feather-like or leaf-like. It's like you can see the structure of the Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go back to that original one. Ooh, that's a cool view. Now I took a picture sideways. Well, I thought I did. I guess I didn't send that one where you can actually see that it's raised. When I hold it sideways, there's a little bit of a point where the water actually raises up a little bit. I will send you these pictures. This is my favorite one. I like that. I'm seeing a side view here at the kind of bottom right. It does. It looks like some sort of, I don't know, maybe it's a extraterrestrial version of you.
Yeah, well, yeah, I have hints that I'm not from here originally.
Oh, yeah, I totally believe that. Totally, totally. Okay, thank you for viewing that with me. I will send that to you.
That was awesome.
Yeah, so what do you think about that? So from a scientific perspective, when I'm engaging with that water, like, do you have any input on what is going on there? Maybe a quantum physics perspective or something?
Yeah, so I explained in the owner's manual, which takes multiple chapters to get through, but basically it kind of leads us from we start with the big picture to say, consciousness is part of the whole system, and then we take you all the way through of the science that kind of proves that you're non-local and that your brain can look into the future and whatnot, which is a scientific certainty, mathematical certainty now. So don't miss that. But it takes you all the way through how consciousness is connected to every bit of the universe because it collapses the wave function. Is that if it collapses the wave functions of inanimate material, that means it's literally connected to every bit of our 4D space-time universe that we live within, which is just a subset of the whole grander multidimensionality existence. But that means that consciousness, which obviously touches us, and likely comes through our microtubules, as explained in the book with all the science, that consciousness connects to every atom around us throughout the entire 4D space-time universe, forwards and backwards in time, independent of space. So not only could you connect with water with which you're in reasonable proximity of holding while it's freezing up or whatever it is that you're doing there to create your process, you could do that with a puddle on Venus if you wanted to, right? If you're focused on that puddle of water on Venus somewhere, if there is a puddle of water, I don't know, never been there, but
That you
basically
remember anyway.
right, exactly. Your connection with consciousness allows you that barrier breaking highway to get out into absolutely everywhere within space-time at any point forwards and backwards in time. So could you certainly affect a petri dish of water that you're holding? Absolutely. If you've got your consciousness focused on it, it's going to react in an interesting way that is congruent with the connections that you're making with the water through consciousness, with the other connections that you're making through teaching or thinking about another person or whatever it is. These things are certainly reasonable given how consciousness according to the grandfathers of quantum mechanics, all of them believed that consciousness was the fundamental driving force behind all of it, not just the fact that it was a part of the system, like the old idea of the the materialist reductionists, who love to say that everything's made of atoms and that our consciousness is an emergent property of a very complex brain, et cetera, and that's the only place that it exists. Well, that's not true. And at the point that you're starting to do an analysis of, let's say, the slime mold that I talked about in the book, where you have individual creatures who are amoeba, who have identical DNA and who should always act in their own self-interest individually. Well, they come together and they create a colony of billions of amoeba put together. And when they come together to create that colony of slime mold, they start to take on different actions, where these group over here become an organ within the slime mold, and then 1% of them become an immune system that they travel around the slime mold looking for pathogens. And when they find one, they swallow up the pathogen, drop out the bottom of the slime mold, and die with the pathogen within them, which is an altruistic action at a cellular level, right? When you're talking about the ability to discern to which job you're going to be in a single-celled organism with identical DNA, that intelligence has to come from somewhere. It's not coming from above in a complex system that becomes an emergent property. It's coming from below, and that intelligence is what we call consciousness, and it's coming up through the field itself, which is connected to every individual atom in the universe, which helps create the existence of those atoms in the first place through the collapse of the wave function. And the materialists are the geniuses, ironically, who are intelligent enough to be able to do the math of the physics, who then can't wrap their minds around non-locality and the ability for the universe to be intelligent itself, right? So what we're talking about in spirituality is the intelligence of the wisdom coming up from below the matter itself and imbuing the matter with the intelligence and the wisdom to be able to take correct action, become evolutionary development, right? Cells don't evolve accidentally over time, and we're not the result of a bunch of atoms happily bumping into each other until they become a organic molecule, and then all of a sudden have the intelligence of that organic molecule to take life-sustaining activity. Bullshit. There are too many fucking miracles in that solution for them to say, well, here's a miracle, and here's a miracle, and here's a miracle, and we can't explain this either, and yada, yada, yada. Well, when you put the consciousness underneath the whole model and start imbuing the whole thing with the intelligence that the universe has, all of a sudden it starts to make sense why the individual slime mold amoeba start to take separate actions for the continuation of the group, the collective self, right?
Yeah.
Where this guy takes on the pathogen, drops out, and dies for the good of the group, because it's the good of the whole that is driving the mechanism of the action, right? That's got to come from somewhere, right? That can't just pop into existence out of a complex. And I understand those super advanced concepts of emergent properties and whatnot, of mathematical analysis of why birds flock together and why fish swim together and react in the way they do, et cetera. That's a mathematical function of some pretty advanced science, but that cannot occur within the cellular existence of a slime mold or within the individual actions of your neurons, especially when our neurons are made up of microtubules, which have been proven to interact with quantum field vibrations. It's like not exactly a smoking gun proving that we have one piece of information traversing across to another location where it's non-local and had to have gone through the quantum field. But at the same time, it's pretty darn good evidence of, kind of walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. Sorry, ducks don't exist. Doesn't make sense to that answer, So, I think ultimately, it's, our existence it comes up from the intelligence of the universe itself. And it's a reverse cascade of our cells doing the right things to a point that we can create our body and then experience the universe through our individual lens of consciousness, to the limitation that we have consciousness, right? We're the dumb ones in the entire multiverse stack. But at the same time, we have a high propensity for love and high propensity for doing really cool things and whatnot. And figuring that out, I think, is the magic of it all, right? When you can tap into the thing that exists beyond you, beyond your body, and then bring that back into you, and then have those things guide your your decisions and guide your life, the direction of your life. That's the magic of being human, and that's what I kind of want to help everybody understand.
I love it. I love it. It's amazing.
Sorry
We
for
are
the
so powerful. We are
rambling answer,
so
but
powerful. No, that was great. That was perfect. We are such powerful beings, and we are all just now coming back online. Thank you so much for being a part of that process for us. You're absolutely amazing. Go see Sean Webb on TikTok. What's your TikTok? It's at
mind hacking happiness.
Mind Hacking Happiness. And
Yeah.
then your book is on Audible, The Human Mind Owner's Manual. Can we get that in like on Amazon too? Or is it only on Audible right now?
Yeah, no, it's available on Amazon. In fact, all the books are available on Amazon and Audible. The Audible versions get higher ratings than the type copy versions. I don't know why, but I read them myself, so you can hear my inflections. I go off.
Yeah, I do. I
Script.
like the Audible. And you know, we're in our culture, it's kind of like, I mean, my kids read, but I
Yeah,
like to listen. I
yeah, me
listen and
too.
do the dishes. So, and
Yeah,
yeah, the way that you tell the story, it's unique and very captivating. So check out his book on Audible for sure. And then where else can we find you? I listed your website in the description.
Mhm.
But you've got a huge following on TikTok. I love your posts on TikTok and YouTube as well.
Yeah.
Tik-
I've got a lot of makeup to do on getting videos up on YouTube. I haven't put up one in a while. I just spent this last part of the last year finishing out this book and making sure that everything was good on it before putting it out. So that's why I've kind of been like radio silence for a little while. But if you search mind hacking happiness, those 3 words, you'll find everything. Instagram, you'll find YouTube, you'll find the books, you'll find all the links. You'll find some papers and stuff that I wrote, white papers and whatnot for MIT at the website, and et cetera. And anything that's going on, you'll be able to find. Like if there's anything new that goes up, you'll be able to find it on the website. So just flag that to check it once every couple of years or once every twice a year, whatever it is, to be
Cool.
able to figure out if I put anything new out. Because when I put something new out, it's going to be a world changing, holy shit event, such as right now we're working on an application that takes all the wisdom in the Mind Hacking Happiness Red Book of how to take control of your emotions, et cetera, and creates a mobile app out of it to include
Wow.
to include an AI, a virtual AI, emotionally intelligent chatbot that we're trying to see if we can build into a virtual Carl Jung, whose entire client base will be you and you alone, which is really cool. But then also have interactive AI leading you through an increase in emotional intelligence and teaching you about your equation of emotion, your expectations and preferences, your perceptions, et cetera. You go through a emotions logging process. It'll take you through different levels of mastery of like mastering your anger, for instance. You got to learn what anger is, and then you got to work with it for a little while. And then you go through a certain number of hoops, and all of a sudden you're mastering your own anger. This app is going to lead everyone through that stuff in an interactive fashion. So if you just go to Mind Hacking Happiness, you'll be apprised of, like get on the email list or whatever, and you'll be apprised of all the cool stuff that's coming out. Because when we do something, it's going to be world-changing shit. It's not going to be a rehash of the same stuff that we've been talking about for the last 7,000 years. That's not why I was sent.
Oh, that's amazing. So do you have an idea of the timeline, the launch on that app?
We're targeting this year, certainly. So that
Awesome.
earlier into the end of this year, we can get version 1 will be the basic framework of understanding your emotional intelligence and how to take control of your mind and how to master your individual emotions, et cetera, and the emotions logging and the journaling and things like that you have to do within the app are all steps that will increase your emotional intelligence. That's version 1. As soon as we get that out, that'll be semi-quick, probably in the next few months that we'll be out with something like that. Then version 2 is the AI having an emotional discussion about your mom with you, which
Wow.
is, yeah,
Very cool. Oh my gosh, how exciting. All right, so everyone be on the lookout. 2024 is the year.
I think
It's the
so.
year. It's the year of the dragon. Like so many of us are stepping into our power. So thank you for supporting us in that, Sean.
Yeah,
Thank you everyone for watching. Have a wonderful day. And you'll have to come back. You'll have to come back and have another conversation with us. That would be
sure.
amazing.
That'd
Because
be
there's
awesome.
so much more to talk about. So much more. All right.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sean.
you're welcome. Have a good day,
All right.
Monica.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Have a good day. Bye.